Namaste, good morning, and welcome to the Qualitist Show. This is episode 16, and my name is Anshuman Tiwari. I'll be your host today, and we have a surprise host as well, and an even bigger surprise guest. Right? Many of you may know the guest because he's usually my partner in crime, but not today. Uh, Before we get on with the show, some usual logistics. I just wanted to know if you can. Today's show is live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter as well. And I can see that certainly, yeah, both LinkedIn and YouTube are working. Twitter has a slight delay usually, so no problem at all. They all also have a new boss, so maybe things will get better there. But coming back to our Qualitist show, so this is those who are new to the show and new to the series. This is episode 16, and what we do in these shows is, of course, bring in distinguished qualitists who have been certified, honored by the Kimpro Foundation over the last year or so. And as you may know, every month we announce qualities of the month. And during the month, towards the end of the month, we bring the same featured or distinguished qualitist to this show so that we can share his or her journey with you, and also, of course, also quiz them on their views on quality, future of quality, and the likes. Right. So this series is extremely popular. I have had a lot of feedback from many of you, and suddenly I can see my feed in on LinkedIn, growing rapidly. So which means the session is working. Okay. We have Sumant in the show already. Sumant, thank you very much. Previous featured qualitist. So yeah, so all this logistics is working, which is always good. Good to know. I will in a minute bring in Mr. Lulla into the show, Mr. Suresh Lulla, of course, who's founder of Kimpro. But before that, I'll give a quick short introduction of Balaji Reddy, who's the guest for the show today. Mm, All of you who have seen the previous 15 episodes, would know him as the partner in crime or my co-host for these sessions. But this month, October 2022, he is the featured qualitist. He's from Pune, one of the top voices in quality in India and globally as well. He did his engineering from Pune, and one of the few people to complete a postgraduate diploma in quality and then a master's of science in quality management from BITS Pilani later on. Member of several um professional bodies on quality like National Center for Quality Management, Indian Institute of Quality Management, Indian Institute of Production Engineers, where he's a life fellow, and several others, and including the Deming Alliance of the UK, where he's an honorary member, and of course, the American Society for Quality, where he's a senior member. After working for in the industry for over 17 years, he moved to now teaching and consulting, where he's a assistant professor in operations at the Balaji Institute of Modern Management in Pune. And yeah, the reason he is here, of course, today is of course, because he's been foremost proponent of the philosophy of Dr. Edwards Deming and the message he carried. So he's been interested in this topic since 1994, that he tells me, and maybe earlier. But he's been very involved in kind of popularizing the work of Deming across the world through several associations, including the Deming community, which he's a part of, and close association with Dr. Henry Neve, and whom he has assisted in training, conducting the training sessions, and also bringing the Deming lectures to India in 2001 and later on as well. Published several papers on the topics, on these topics, and I will not go into the details. Very, very popular and active on LinkedIn. So if you want to know more about him, check him out on LinkedIn. Uh, I think some other, of course, he he counts his 1 hour meeting with Dr. Juran as one of the special days and moments in his life. We will know more about that in a bit when we speak to him. Very recently, last year, he was also featured, perhaps the only Indian to be featured on the famous Lean podcast hosted by Mark Greben, and obviously means that he's globally well renowned in this field. Now, that's Balaji Reddy for you, but I will bring in Mr. Lulla. Namaste, sir. And for his introduction to Balaji, which I'm sure Balaji is eagerly awaiting.
Good morning, delegates, Qualitists. Anshuman, as usual, has given a very comprehensive introduction to Balaji. It reminds me of a, a conversation with Dr. Juran 35 years ago, where he advised me if you want a job done, look for the busiest person. He will find time. The others will find excuses. Anshuman and Balaji qualify for the busiest people I know. Balaji is passionate about the Deming philosophy. You must have gathered that. While he is an assistant professor, I don't know what he does there, but he's also on the advisory council of Edwards Deming Institute in the USA. In addition, he is an honorary member of the Deming Alliance in the UK, founder of the Deming Forum of India. Now, USA, UK, India, how does he find time for a Qualitist show? Thank you, Balaji. You have created the time, and the two of you, Anshuman and you, have made it happen.
Thank you.
I understand you met Dr. Juran at his residence on 21st February 2002. I would like to hear more about that. And I'd also like to understand the relationship between Deming and Juran. Throw us some insights. I will thereafter share my insights of the relationship. And how can you put PDCA in your DNA as well as the quality trilogy of Juran? Okay. Balaji, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And good morning to all the delegates. Also would like to wish them a happy Diwali. We've just had a festival. So all those here in India, happy Diwali to all of you. I hope you had a nice and safe Diwali. Yes, Anshuman, you were saying something.
No, this is awkward because you and I do this Jugalbandi.
Exactly.
But I will be the Balaji, the co-host today as well, and you be Balaji, the guest. But wanted to just quickly ask you for any opening comments that you might have, and then we will get into some questions later on.
But yeah, it's like you said, awkward that I'm on this side of the table. I thought the two of us were put into place by Suresh sir to only terrorize others, and we didn't feel that we would be terrorized ourselves one day. But I think when we were anointed as Qualitists, it had to come along with it. We had to come on the other side. You came on the other side of the table once, and now I'm here. I felt that we could have, we always had to ask questions of others because both of us love to learn from people, right? Instead of talking, we love to listen. And so here now in this show, the two of us have to talk. So
And to be
Yeah.
honest, asking questions is the easier part. The I know from experience the other part is tougher. But let's get it on with the show. We already have quite a few people on the show. Dr. Parag Rindani is here. So thank you, Dr. Parag. And he's informed today. So to get you started, Balaji, Dr. Parag has given you a name now. Okay.
Look at that.
So I'll be easy with the questions since you already have transferred the money that you promised me. But I'll start with a simple one that we of course know Balaji as the this fantastic person who promotes Dr. Deming's works today, and one of the foremost voices on quality. And we just learned that not just in India but across the globe as well. But we always ask our qualities this question, that this is not how it started. So, how did it start for you briefly? And what was your early interaction with Mr. Lula? And then we'll get into some of the questions, as Mr. Lula also pointed out, around the lessons of Deming, Juran, and therefore. Over to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you talk about quality, I think I discovered something, just in the 90s after, it's most on a personal sense, after my father passed away. And my father had been to Japan in 1964. He was there for 6 months. And I remember 1980 when the Japanese onslaught on American markets had begun. And, people used to come to our homes to talk to my father because he was in Japan, and how good were the Japanese. And he would talk a lot about uh, how he worked with them and their culture. But he always mentioned about, two Americans who assisted them. And I never knew who he was. I was a kid, running around in the hall when people used to be there. But I remember some of the stories which when he used to regale them. So those stuck in my head, but it made sense only later. In 1994, I was working with a company called Lightel in Pune. They manufacture infrared lamps. And I want to take this opportunity to reach out to Dr. Avinash Kulkarni and Mr. Shirish Karkare, who took me for a course called Leadership Through Quality. This was part of the Xerox quality, total quality strategy. And there I, went through the entire course for 5 days. And that's when I learned about the world of quality was open to me. And I wanted to go deeper into that. And so I did this course called the Postgraduate Diploma in Quality Management. And that's where, when we were studying the history of quality, I heard the name Deming and Juran. And it all started falling into place, what my father was saying. And for some reason, both these names got stuck in my head. Later on, I acquired their books. And I remember, the first time I touched Dr. Juran's Quality Control Handbook, the 1988 edition, I said, this is the Bible. When I was reading it, I said, there's nothing better than this. And then I got hold of Dr. Deming's book, Out of the Crisis. That is the only one available at that time in India. And that became like the Bhagavad Gita. So these were my two books. And I wanted to, I started dreaming about being like Deming, Juran, and wanted to be like them. And that's when I came to know that Deming was no more. He had passed away a year before I got into the field of quality. And then around that time, I started working with Mr. R.V. Ramchandran. And there I saw, Qualtech 1989, the first Qualtech award, the proceedings were there. And I remember going through that and I saw Mr. Suresh Lulla's name and his photograph. And of course, Ramchandran sir was there. And then the secret thing was there. Okay, I want to meet Mr. Suresh Lulla. And imagine my shock when I went to wish Ramchandran sir happy Diwali. And I saw Suresh Lulla sir sitting there. I said, "Oh my God, the Suresh Lulla is sitting here." And I wanted to say, I want to say so much to him, but I just had to deliver the box of sweets to him and leave. I just wished him, for happy Diwali and left, and that was it. But we met then years later when we were celebrating Dr. Juran's centenary. That, if you remember, Anshuman, I met you for the first time then. It was
It was
July of
July of
2004.
2004.
And that's when it had a printout with Suresh Lulla sir's take on 100 years of Dr. Juran. And I remember I went up to him very nervously and I said, "Sir, could you please autograph this for me?" So, and I still have it. I think I put it up. I sent it to you, right? His autograph, and I treasure that. It's a coveted thing for me. So that's how my involvement into quality, into Deming, and into with and my meeting with Mr. Suresh Lulla happens. You can see some things are fated in life, I guess.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you had no clue at that time that you will be meeting him a lot more and being on the same show.
No
So,
way. No way. If someone would have told me that in 2004, I'd have said, "Are you kidding?"
so we can count our blessings. So moving on with the show. Thank you first of all, Balaji, for that candid and very um personal, emotional introduction that you had. And but you are more known, apart from of course being a professor in operations, you are more known for your promotion and taking the word of Deming across to as many people as you can, and which is a very worthy cause. But if we were to, if you and I were stuck in an elevator, and I know that you may not want me in that elevator, but assume that you have me in that elevator for a minute or two, what will you summarize as Deming's message for our audience as?
Yeah, when he went to Japan, actually, he made a telling statement because he said the rate at which the Japanese are going to be now moving ahead, the world is going to come together. I think the inscription on the Deming medal says it all. The right quality and uniformity are foundations of commerce, prosperity, and peace. I believe that's the message he wanted to take to the whole world. And he said cooperation is the key. Cooperation would give you much better results than generic competition. And his take on competition was different. He said you need to compete with and not compete against. And he said the whole world should come together because not all of the knowledge in the world is contained in only one person or one company or one country. We need to come together. And I think that was the key behind all his teachings. He spoke about this in the 1950s and 60s to the Japanese, and if you go deep and check, they all work together. They're not trying to pull each other down. They're trying to help each other. And I think that as people, he wanted that to be taken all over the world. And he said the outcome of those kind of things, quality is an outcome of all that. And if you do all these things well, he wanted people. In fact, one of his statement was, better quality, greater productivity, customer happier, and everybody is happy. He used the word happy and not satisfied. Yeah, and he said the happier people at work lead to happier things in the market, happier customers. He wanted people to be happy in life. So I think that was his entire approach, and that's why he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in '92, which he never got. It went to someone else, but he was nominated for that reason, for the Nobel Peace, because he was advocating world peace, if I may say so, through quality management. That's the way he looked at it.
Hmm, that's interesting. Another aspect of leading luminary. Um, and moving on, of course, just a little bit more technical. So obviously, Dr. Deming was more popular for PDCA and control charts and use of control charts and moving PDSA into PDCA. But whatever little I have studied is, I've been fascinated by the 14 points and from out of the crisis and the profound system of knowledge as being like really foundational concepts. Like for Juran, what he did with trilogy and the universal method of improvement, these are like 100 years from now, we will still be doing the Juran trilogy and the concept of improvement. So the similar stuff came from Juran Deming in terms of the 14 points and the profound system of knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, any views on that for our audience who may or may not, because these are not the popular versions of Deming's work. The
Yeah.
popular version is the
Right.
control path and the PDCA, but the profounder version is, or the
Yeah.
concept is.
So you see, when he first was rediscovered in America and he started being called for for programs and consultations. He essentially would talk about, he started teaching what he taught in Japan. And
Hmm.
the audience was, okay, yeah, this all sounds very good, but please teach us what you taught in Japan. He said, I am teaching you what I taught in Japan. But they were expecting step one, step two, step three. And so he responded to that 1, 2, 3 by giving 14 points. The real philosophy, I think he put together, when he had that 2 year hiatus, because he was diagnosed with cancer and all that stuff. And I think he had time to himself. So in 1989, he got together what he called a system of profound knowledge. He said you need to have these 4 competencies in order to have an all-round view of things, a very detailed view of things happening around you. Profound is the right word, but it sounds very self-serving. One, he said, you need to have a holistic view of things happening around. There are no events in this world, only eventualities. Second, you need to understand that people are the most important part of systems that we create, right? And we need to understand how they fit into a system. Third, he said every system performance and output is subject to some kind of variation. We need to understand that. And the way we study systems is through what he called as a theory of knowledge. And so these 4 sciences, he said, and these 4 competencies work together. And you don't need to be a master of any of them. You need to be competent enough to understand things around you. You will see things differently. And when you see things differently, you ask different questions. When you ask different questions, you will get different answers. When you get different answers, you will draw different conclusions. You will take different decisions, and then you'll get different results. It's insanity to ask the same questions again and again. So management is not about giving the right answers. Management is about asking the correct questions. And he said that comes through profound knowledge and not subject matter knowledge, which is more internal. This is more from the outside, if I may say so. The 14 points would come out as application of that thinking. And you can never do the 14 points. They're eventualities. That means if you think in that profound manner, you will see that the 14 points already exist in your organization. Or you should, if they don't, you start working towards them. If you know what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how it was. Whereas I see this attempt of people trying to make it into a to-do list, which is wrong. There's no method in Deming. There's just a thinking. Thinking comes from there. And the PDSA, again, was meant to be something else. It was from the theory of knowledge, because he said he was casting, a learning system into a business context, and it assumed that form. When he took it to Japan, it was a 4-part cycle. Originally, Walter Schuhart's 3-part cycle, which was specification, production, and inspection. He added a 4th step, market research, specification, production, and inspection, which became market research, design, production, sales. And then the Japanese down the line made it generic and called it PDCA. He never called it that. And when they took it as PDCA to him, he didn't quite like the word check. He said that's very static. So he replaced it with the word study, which is more dynamic. He said, in check, you just check whether it's right or wrong, but in study, you study why it was right and why it was wrong. And there's nothing wrong in the study, because you always learn. You go through the cycle again and again and again. I would recommend someone to read Out of the Crisis, where he's describing how to implement point number 14, and he draws that cycle. It's beautifully explained what he meant by that. It was never meant to be actors. That's it. You're done. And if it fails, he said, go through it again. If you get the answers that you want, go through it again, yet again. Don't ever leave it to chance. It could have been just a happenstance. So do it again. So it's a continual learning that he believed in. That's what I look at.
No, fantastic. And those in the audience who didn't realize that Balaji is a professor, now you know. So the 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 description of how the PDCA and eventually PDSA worked out couldn't have been any better. But very well said, Balaji. I've also read a little bit about this, that some, and there is a parallel between how the Pareto law was never really Pareto's, right? So same
Exactly.
way, Deming actually was only working on a concept, and somebody else and then several other people named it in a convenient way, which was easy to remember, rolled off the tongue better, and was easier to print. And we all know these luminaries by those things. Maybe a good thing actually, because that makes them popular. but
Yeah.
little deeper knowledge is always good, as a good reminder for all those people. And this is a uh, topic specific show, so all people who join these shows are interested by nature in quality and related topics. So thank you very much for the explanation. So Sriram is asking about a little bit more insight on these things. Yes, Sriram, we will later on the show bring in a little more, time permitting. But as we get closer to the half an hour show, customary for me to remind everybody, usually Balaji reminds everybody to leave questions. But today I will happily take over this responsibility and remind everybody to leave your questions in the chat. If you are on Twitter, YouTube, or LinkedIn watching this live, please leave in your questions. And in the last 15-20 minutes of the show, we will pick up those questions. And yeah, so moving on, Balaji, I think Mr. Lura also pointed out this in the beginning, and that mm, there is much made about what was going on between Deming and Juran. None of them are alive for us to seek a clarification, but you are one of the few people who have been closest to both, I would say, profound systems or profound thinkers in the field. And you met Dr. Juran as well. So maybe a little bit around how you came to meet Dr. Juran, and if the conversation was not confidential, you can share a little bit of that. I know you got a book as well from there, and so that bit, and then anything that you have to share on your, I mean, your views on the so-called rift is a strong word, but the so-called difference of opinion between the two luminaries in their time. There is no evidence. Most people just make it up, but
Yeah.
good to hear from an expert on that.
Okay. My experience on this, when I was going to be going in February of 2002. My paper was selected and shortlisted, and I had to make a presentation at the Deming Research Seminar at the Deming Institute. They used to have an annual research seminar up until the year, I think, 2017, 2014, I'm sorry. Post that, they've turned it into a conference. That time, they used to have Deming scholars coming and making presentations. So my paper got shortlisted, and when I saw that I was visiting New York City, so then I thought, why don't I take this opportunity to also meet up with Dr. Juran? So I sent an email to the Juran Institute, and his secretary, Laura Sutherland, was there. And she replied, and she said, "Let me know of your plans, and we'll definitely arrange for a moment for you. Let's see what we can do." Because I was going to be there only for 3 or 4 days, and I said 2 days was the conference, and then just for another 2 days, I said if I can, if he's nearby, I'll try to make it. And sure enough, I got a reply, and then when my visa, because at that time, Anshuman, if you remember, September 11 had happened, and I was very, very scared that I'd not get the visa. And I got the visa. Luckily, when things have to happen, they happen. And then when I was leaving for the United States, I was called by some of the seniors, because I had met some of the senior people in India whom I was interacting with, and they said, "You're going to meet Dr. Juran? Are you getting that chance?" I said, "You have yet to give me a schedule, but yes." "Well, then don't ever utter the name of Deming in front of him. He hates it," and blah blah blah. And I was a little taken aback. I said, "Why would he hate it?" Anyway, um, when I finally reached America, and then I called Laura Sutherland, and she said, yes, so the scheduled meeting's fixed for tomorrow, and it's at 9:30 a.m. and blah blah blah. And she said that Dr. Juran has asked you to take the cab from the Rye station and come right there. He was staying in a retirement complex at that time. And so he said he's staying with his wife, and so he has all the time in the world, so don't worry. You can be there by 9:30. I said, sure enough. And she said that he'd like to give you directions. Would you like to talk to him right now? I said, what? I said, my heart's beating too fast. I'm sorry. I can't talk to him right now. And then she said, okay. And she said, he'll give you directions. So I had to call him up the next day when we were leaving, because, directions are very important in the United States. And the postal address is one thing. and he gave me such accurate directions. It was amazing. I remember he said, take the plane and Parkway Drive, take the first left turn, and just go 100 yards, and you'll come to the Osborne Gate and ask for Juran, and they'll let you in. It was, and I remember what happened that morning was it was very foggy, and we missed the Plane and Parkway Drive turn. And if you know, in America, you miss a turn, you have to go all the way around and come back. And so when I reached his home, it was quarter to 11. Can you imagine that? I was an hour late because of the fact that we missed a turn. And as soon as I rang the doorbell, I was scared, that I was late. What would he say? But when he opened the door, he said, I was worried. It was foggy this morning. You might have missed the turn. This is called FMEA. He had predicted the whole thing. And anyway, then he said, we don't want to disturb Mrs. Juran. Please, let's come inside. And then, of course, we had a wonderful, wonderful chat about a lot of things. As the first thing I mentioned to him, he said, "What brings you to United States of America?" And I said, "I was here for the Deming conference at the W. Edwards Deming Institute." And he just raised his hand and said, "Ed Deming and I, we go back a long, long time. He and I were very, very good friends, very good friends." And I was dumbfounded. So and the other thing that fueled all this was this article in Business Week called Dueling Pioneers, where it was just so unbecoming of the editor to write all that Deming said this about Juran and Juran said this about Deming. So I actually believed what those senior people told me, don't utter the name Deming. So I was just stunned. He said, and he looked at me and he said, what happened? I said, Dr. Juran, I just want to confess something here. I said that, I am so sorry, but I read the article in Newsweek, Business Week, sorry, Dueling Pioneers. And I said, I came with a very different mindset. He said, oh, you read that, did you? I said, yes, I did. Oh, did you read my reply to that? And I said, no, I thought as much, he said. So I said, do you have, is there any evidence, any copy that you have? He said, not worth it. He said, it's not even worth it. And he said, and he said, well, I just told them very simply, it was a bunch of poppycock. Now, I didn't know what the word meant. I only read that in a dictionary after I reached home. When I read poppycock, nonsense, absolute nonsense. So I just want to tell the world, here's a man who, without any prompt, it was just natural. I just said Deming, and he just raised his hand and said, Ed Deming and my. Why is the world talking like this about that? All right. And then, of course, I met him for 1 hour, yes, but I did keep in touch with him regularly over the telephone. I used to phone him after that for every birthday of his. And as and when I needed any clarification about a few things, I did call him up. He didn't have much time to give me, but he gave me time. And I want to make, now this is a confession time, you said, but the part of this conversation was confidential, so I can't reveal all of it. But after he wrote his autobiography, there were a few instances there where he spoke about, wrote about Deming and all that, which again fueled this fire that, that it was, that all was not well. And I did raise that, why he said this and why he said that. He did answer. I mean, first he listened me out. And after listening to everything, because I said, you said this in the 1940s, but you said this now. So what's actually the truth? What actually transpired? And he said a few things. I will not get into it. I respect his memory. But he left me with two sentences, which I think just finish everything. One, he said, if it's anything, he said, I cherished and treasured my friendship with Ed. And the next thing he said is, if it means anything to you, young man, he said, when I heard of his passing, I shed tears. And when he said that, he was not in front of me, I felt he had a lump in his throat. So I'm going to live with that.
And now we all will live with that. I, of course, have heard a little bit of this, Balaji, but I wanted the audience to experience and hear it from you. Not many people with this first-hand, and this is as first-hand as it gets. So,
Yep.
so those who are in the live show today, there you go. You can say that you have the answer to one of the questions that as a Qualitist might have plagued you.
Yeah, he had. In fact, let me tell you what he said after that. He said, when he said I shed tears, and he said, I consider this topic closed. We never discuss this again. This was in 2000. I remember this was this. His autobiography came out in 2003. So 2000, between 3 and 4, just when he was turning 100, we spoke about this, and we never spoke about this again. So it was just the next 3, 4 times or 4, 5 times that I called him up, we discussed issues, but not these things.
Good for you. I will try and bring up. Just 1 second. I'm trying to bring up something that might be of interest.
Can I, can I add something to Balaji?
Yeah, sure, sir. I'm just trying to bring something in which seems to be not working. Sure, go ahead, sir.
Both Deming and Juran had the same boss,
Yes.
Luhart.
Oh, shoe hat.
And they worked with him at different times, but the alignment of thinking, Schuhart, Deming, and Juran, was all around PDCA. And the PDCA is the Schuhart cycle, popularized by Deming and improvised by Juran. Now, that's one point. And the other is that when Malcolm Baldrige invited thinkers on quality to define the criteria for the to contain Japanese economic aggression, and in the criteria, if you look carefully, and the underlying theme is PDCA in each criteria. The questions are designed that way. And the scoring guidelines also. You start with a PDCA, then you move on to Juran on quality improvement, etc., and you move on all the way to performance excellence. I'm cutting out more detail,
Yeah.
but they were very good friends. And they worked at Bell Labs also, each of them at different times. Professor Deming was invited by the Emperor of Japan to come and guide them into being more competitive because they didn't have a local market, Japan. They had to export 90% of what they produced. So they needed to factor in logistic costs also. So Deming at that point said, I'd like to introduce my friend Juran to come and help you on this aspect of the. So it's been completely misrepresented that these two were at loggerheads. They were so close. And it's admirable that two people in the same field collaborated rather than competed.
Mm.
And that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, sir. Balaji, Dr. Parag, as usual, has summed it up. So what I'll do is that I'll take one or two questions, and of course we have a interesting Anna Zita from Romania joining. Could be your fan, Balaji, and
No.
glad that you can join.
I
And it helps us when the show goes across to multiple countries. And please do check our previous shows and the upcoming ones as well. Dr. Saurav Maiti has a quick question around, and we will quickly take a few only, Balaji. But he has a question that I heard that Deming put his unique ideas to modify the Short cycle to design the PDC cycle. Would love to hear more. We did hear a little bit, Dr. Saurav, but since you asked specifically, I would bring this question to Balaji.
Yeah, the original cycle was a three-part cycle. I told you it was in the book called Statistical Methods from the Viewpoint of Quality Control, which was written by Schuhart but edited by Deming. And the three steps were specification, production, and inspection. Specification, the way Schuhart described it, he said it's translation of a customer requirement into something doable. Production is an act carried out to make that happen, and inspection is checking the validity and verifying. Veracity was the word he used of your actions. Now, this was in 1939. When Walter Schuhart had come to India in 1947, by the way, and he was here for 3 months, and he met with many top people here in India. He visited 30 different companies, which included Hero Cycles, if I'm not mistaken. In that, he added a fourth step to this, saying research, specification, production, and inspection. And when he added the word research, he attributed that to, I'm using his words, my esteemed colleague, W. Edwards Deming, master of sampling. The research, he said, was market research. So it became a four-part cycle: research, specification, production, and inspection. And this was around the time Deming was giving his lectures in Japan simultaneously. So he gave, when I say simultaneously, there's a big misconception here too. He started unofficially giving lectures in hotel rooms, in the room where he used to stay, and people from companies would be there. And one of the people was from Matsushita, the other guy was from Showa Electric. I remember all these people sitting. If you read Deming's diaries, he talks about they used to sit around a table and with the one lamp on, and he used to lecture them. And that's where he called this as market research, design, production, and sales. Later on, of course, when his notes were made, then this became more and more popular, known as the Deming wheel, and he kept correcting them, saying that no, it's the Schuhart cycle, it's not the Deming cycle. But I think by the 1970s, the Japanese, made a generic kind of a thing and called it as plan to check and act. And when he heard that, he said, no, check's not a good word. It should be more study. So that's the only other change he made. But adding market research in a broad sense, in a managerial sense, was definitely his addition to what Walter Schuhart originally conceptualized.
Thanks, Balaji. Dr. Saurav, hopefully you got your response. Dr. Parag has a question, and of course, we all know he comes from a medical this thing, but the question is a little more generic. Please share your views on relevance of Juran's ideology or methods in the dynamic and changing digital world, which is what we live in today. Yeah, very interesting. Anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, their teachings are like, the Bhagavad Gita was written 10,000 years ago. That doesn't mean it's lost any relevance today. Same with the teachings of Deming and Juran, they've not lost relevance. In fact, I think our ever dependence on them is going to go up by a staggering degree, if you want to ask me. Because if they were to be resurrected today, both these gentlemen along with Walter Schuhart, I'm sure they'd be very happy to see, some of the things happening, that things going digital. But one thing that will really excite them is the fact that data is being collected almost instantaneously, which was not available to them at that point in time. Then and you can actually process the data almost immediately. I'm wondering what they would have done with the kind of information that's available now. All right, and I think that's the thing that's lacking today. People don't know what to do with the data. I'd done a typical kind of a study some time back, and I found that 43% of the people in companies don't know what to do with the information they have. So information is there. So the digital world has changed the way we capture, present and collate and I mean the information, but interpretation still requires the teachings of the masters. So I believe that this will never go away. Uh, these both the methods by both these gentlemen will never ever go away because they're telling us how to look at things around us. We need to interpret things differently.
And Balaji, if I may, add a couple of points there. So see, the sometimes the digital world or the impact of the digital world is overblown or blown out of proportion as well. This is not happening today. This has been happening for the last 50 years. So when semiconductors happened,
Yeah.
big transistors became radios became transistors, and the all these things. So there is no overnight change that is happening that is suddenly blowing things apart, and nothing that was relevant earlier will be relevant, and completely new body of knowledge will emerge. None of that happens. Each time when you know I'm sure for humanity, when the wheel was invented, there was similar hue and cry. When farming tools were invented, there was similar hue and cry, and none of these were invented overnight, like it is happening today. So if new digital technologies are called as inventions, that's rubbish, because they are developments. It takes 5 years, 20 years for any of these things to develop. And just to take one example from what Balaji said, the availability of data and the ability to take controlled decisions based on preset rules is already in place in power plants, in chemical processes, in all of that uses what Schuhart developed as the what we know as control chart. So how many points will be above the center line and median line and so on? All of that is already used for 50 years, 30 years in all process plants. So the same will now be possible in other plants. Who knows tomorrow for the data on internet page loading, downloading, and other stuff, or the time taken to record an order or deliver an order will automatically use a control chart. It's much more easier now. So actually, to respond to Dr. Parag's question, the advent of this so-called digital world, and I am speaking from a slight IT background as well, makes implementation of quality methods, tools, principles a lot more easier and makes more sense. Maybe the Schuhart cycle was 100 years before its time.
Just want to add to something what you said, Anshuman. It's interesting. One of my students is working in Swiggy, and he's at a high position right now. And he just sent me a message some time back. He's drawing control charts. He says control charts from the time they, they receive the order till the time the restaurant responds to it. Control chart from the time the restaurant prepares till the executive picks it up. Control chart from the time the executive picks it up and delivers to the home.
There you go. Everybody knows which company I work for, so I'll not repeat that. But the smartest tool in the last 2 years that I have implemented, hold your breath, is the checklist. So, so these things don't go out of fashion, and you said it better than anybody could. But in the time that we have, of course, you covered the Deming-Juran question in quite detail. But what about your views on the future of quality and how? And some of it we covered in the last 2 minutes, Balaji. But anything on the future of quality, or how you see it changing or not changing at all, and so on?
No, I would say that the ways and means of getting there would keep getting better, but the concept that we have to eventually add value to someone's life, I don't think that's ever going to change. And we have to do it in the most economical fashion. If you're talking about running a business, then you're adding values to someone's life in the most economical fashion. I mean, putting it in one sentence, what Deming said, economic satisfaction of demand. That's what we're looking at. And the only ways and means of getting there perhaps would get much more focused, much more streamlined, much better, innovative ways of doing it, perhaps. But I think the basic fundamental will never change. So quality in that sense, making, for people living happier lives, etc. That should be the north the north star, so to say, and that shouldn't change. And I don't think that's going to change. Maybe only, like I said, that like you said, the digital stuff and the media, the ways and means, these are enablers. So the ways and means of doing these would definitely get better, but some things don't change.
and good for us that they don't change. The one, of course, area that we always and since we covered Juran a little bit, your views on applications or the concept of Juran trilogy as it applies today, anything that you want to bring in?
The way I look at it, I think some people are still have not grasped the complete deep meaning about a lot of things that he came up with. All right, even though he was more clear in his writing than W. Edwards Deming was. I mean, W. Edwards Deming was he kind of provoked you into thinking, but Dr. Juran gave the answers, a lot of the answers, and I think his books are more clear, and you don't have to read it again, but it's more implementation. I still feel when I walk around, when I meet with some people, when I discuss with them, they've got many of the things wrong. I'll just give you one instance here: cost of quality, a simple stuff, such a powerful concept. He came up with that idea to grab management's attention that they need to improve quality, that there's an economic measure of that. Instead, people have actually said, oh, Juran only focuses on costs. He doesn't focus on anything else. Is that what he meant this to be? I mean, how wrong is this? So just because they have not understood the purpose behind each of the entire trilogy, separate parts of the trilogy also. The moment they read it, oh, I've done it all. That's not how it is. He never meant it that way. You could give it any other name you want, but these are fundamentals which will never change. And at any given point in time, one of those three parts of the trilogy must be going on in your company. Otherwise, you're not a quality-oriented company. Either they could be going on simultaneously or separately, but they must be going on. If you're not doing that, you're just really clearly not managing for quality.
Very well put. I have Pranjal Gupta, and this is not so much a question, Balaji, but I think a response from what we said earlier. I view digital information
Yeah,
available as complementary
exactly.
in quality concept. Very well said with the real-time
Yeah.
availability of. Yeah, rightly said, Pranjal. While you were bringing up the Juran trilogy point and other points as well, what something occurred to me, Balaji, that more recently I've been my interest has also been in coaching people for career success and growth, and I recently was speaking to somebody, and actually I spoke to later on other people just to test the theory out and applied the principles
Hmm.
of Juran trilogy to career growth and success, and how you can set your standard, how you can control your behaviors and actions, and then work on improving what you are doing. So it actually applies to even uh, personal growth or career growth
Yeah.
situations in many ways. So it is many ways a universal concept that is probably yet to see the wide application that it deserves.
Yeah, you could apply PDSA to your life. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a learning cycle. In fact, if you look at a 2-year-old child, they're actually applying PDSA.
every day.
They ask
So
questions.
the so Balaji, if you may not have realized, but we switched the questions for you. You didn't have any prior approved questions that we normally give our speakers, so we wanted to make it difficult. But there is one question that you might have guessed and you might be prepared for, which is usually our last question is about books. What are you reading? What would you recommend? Any interesting stuff that you could share with our audience?
Okay, for me, I think I would even today recommend, you know, uh, if you're talking about, since we're talking about Deming and Juran, then all of Juran's books. For me, his best book, I would never trade that for anything in the world, is Managerial Breakthrough. I think it's the most classic book ever written on managerial, performer. But anybody who wants to be a good manager has to read that book. And Out of the Crisis and New Economics of Deming's, definitely. But then, it requires a different level of kind of commitment, can I say, to reading, because he's not very clear it just provokes you, like I said, more Socratic. But definitely those two books. Among the newer books that I have read, I mean, I don't see anything that has caught my fancy much, except for the new technologies and all that sort of technological stuff, just to keep myself updated. But in quality, I would definitely recommend, uh, Juran on planning, Juran on leadership for quality, quality by design. But managerial breakthroughs, classic, and that both of Deming's books. For quality generally, again, like I said, I have even Walter Schuhart's books still excite me. Uh, both uh, the statistical methods as well as economic control of control of quality of manufactured product. So both these very presented the control chart for the first time, the logic behind it, it still drives me on. But yeah, these are the books I would definitely recommend.
Sure. Thank you, Balaji. Managerial breakthrough is certainly, absolutely classic. Every word, every page is like another book. It is deeply
Exactly.
condensed and yet easy to understand. Okay, the we are toward the end of the session, and we have still quite a few questions. But I know that you both have a hard stop today at noon, so I'll let you go but not before Mr. Lula has some closing comments, and then we can close. Anything from you, sir?
Thank you, Balaji, for all your insights. I learned a lot. And the, it's like physics to engineering. The physics remains, but the engineering keeps getting a different interpretation. Currently, a person who's in his 90s and also a quality guru is Dr. James Harrington,
Hmm.
living in California in his retirement. He's a great interpreter of Deming and Juran, and what is unique to him is right brain thinking, creative thinking for breakthrough solutions. Some of his books are classics there: Creativity Tools, Innovation Tools, etc. So there is another guru who you need to go and meet, Balaji, and that will be the trilogy. One last insight, but I can only give it for Duran, is that his he was an anthropologist by hobby. So when you see his institute logo, you see a craftsman and a pyramid. He's working on the pyramid. That's the logo. According to all these gurus, the ultimate icon for quality is the craftsman. The craftsman understands customer needs, translates those needs into features, benchmarks those features to be best in class, and sets goals. Then he chooses his equipment to deliver the goals, and he seeks perfection. But survival of his family is at stake. Perfection at what cost? So there's some optimization, and that leads to what is called process capability. Process capability is to quality planning what budget is to financial planning. With an ill designed budget, can you be sure of profit? With an incapable process, can you be sure of quality? Who defines quality? Customer. Who's the final inspector? Customer. And Balaji, who pays your salary? Customer. Chase your customer, not your competition.
Yeah, right.
And that was the mantra.
Yeah.
With that, I will conclude my closing remarks.
No, totally.
Yeah, I'd
And
like to just
yeah, sure,
yeah, I'd
Balaji.
just like to end it. Yeah, that for those interested, because if you're talking about the works of Deming, uh, my living guru for me in the Deming world, Professor Henry Neve, who's now in retirement, he's written a classic book called 12 Days to Deming. It's like a course which you can take it on. You know, you can download and read it online. You can do it by yourself. Also, the Deming Institute has developed a digital kind of a course on this called, not on 12 days, but they have a separate course called Deming Next. And it's soon to be available in India at reasonable prices. Right now, it's available in the United States. For them, it's, you know, that they have a fee for it, but they're going to be doing it in India. We're going to be launching it in an Indian kind of, I mean, in the sense with the currency and the conversion over here very soon. And so Dr. Deming's grandson is looking into the works. Incidentally, I'm in touch with both their grandsons, with Deming's grandson as well as Juran's grandson. So I couldn't get them together, but I'm trying to get these two gentlemen together someday, maybe.
Sure. With that, I think it is time to thank you, Balaji, and thank you very much for a fantastic session. I hope, and I actually am sure that the audience benefited a lot from today's session. From next, enough of this, speaking from on the other side. Next session, you are back on the back on the familiar side. So we will very
See, I
soon.
told you it'll be bad.
We leave that
Now you
judgment to
know.
the audience. We leave that judgment to the audience. We are interested parties, so we can't comment on that. But for everybody else in the audience, if you already don't follow Balaji or Mr. Suresh Lulla, you should do that on LinkedIn. And for further sessions and alerts, usually we do these sessions on the last Saturday of every month. So look forward to you joining the other session. With that, once again, thank you, Balaji. Thank you, Mr. Lulla, and our lovely audience. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.